Baptism. You've probably seen it, right? Someone dressed in white, a body of water, and this really powerful, significant moment. But have you ever stopped to think about where this ritual actually comes from? Well, in this explainer, we're going to dig deep into the ancient roots of this modern ceremony.
Most of us, we probably connect baptism with John the Baptist, standing in the Jordan River. But what if I told you that real story starts way, way before that? That the origins of this Christian ritual are actually found deep within ancient Jewish tradition. So, where did it all begin? That's what we're here to find out.
You see, the story of baptism doesn't kick off with a big splash in the New Testament. No, it starts centuries earlier, with a really specific set of ancient laws all about purity, right there in the Hebrew Bible. And honestly, this is the absolute key to understanding how this whole ritual evolved.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll tackle this ancient idea of purity. Then we'll look at the specific laws around it. We'll explore how water started to take on a much deeper, symbolic meaning. Then we'll build the bridge over to Christian baptism, and finally, we'll wrap up by looking at this amazing legacy. Let's dive in.
So, to really get to the bottom of our question about where baptism came from, we've got to travel back in time. We need to get our heads around a concept that was absolutely fundamental to the ancient world.
And that big concept is ritual purity. Okay, think about it like this. Before a surgeon goes into an operating room, they have to scrub in, right? It's not because they're a bad person or morally dirty. It's because they have to be in a specific sterile state to enter that sacred space. Well, ritual purity was kind of like that. It wasn't about being sinful. It was about being in the correct ceremonial state to approach God and be part of the community's worship.
So what did this idea of ritual purity actually look like in day-to-day life? Well, that's where the laws of purity come into play. These rules, laid out in the Hebrew Bible, really are the foundation for everything that follows. If you crack open the book of Leviticus, you'll see there were a bunch of ways a person could become ritually unclean. Things like having a certain skin disease or even just coming into contact with a dead body. But look at the solution. What's the common thread here? It's water. Washing with water was the essential go-to requirement to become clean again. And get this, these rituals could be incredibly elaborate. Just look at the process for someone who is healed of a skin disease. I mean, this was a whole multi-day event. It involves sacrifices, shaving off all your hair, and, of course, bathing your entire body in water. This was way more than just taking a bath. It was this huge symbolic act of being welcomed back into the life of the community.
But here's where things get really interesting. Over time, the meaning behind these water rituals started to shift. Water was on the verge of a major transformation, from just a tool for physical cleansing to this incredibly powerful symbol for spiritual renewal. We can actually trace this evolution in archaeology. Early on, people probably just used whatever was around, rivers, springs. But then, during what's known as the Second Temple period, we see the development of these special, purpose-built immersion pools called a mikvah. And these weren't just any old pools. Later on, there were super strict rules about how they had to be built, right down to the minimum amount of living water, like rainwater, they had to contain.
And check this out. This is an actual mikvah from back then. See those steps leading down into it? This wasn't a swimming pool. It was designed for one thing and one thing only: complete, full-body immersion. This very practice is a direct physical ancestor of what we now know as Christian baptism. It's amazing.
Now, while the physical practice of the mikvah was developing, something was happening in the world of ideas too. The prophets of Israel started to talk about water differently. It wasn't just for washing anymore. They used it as this powerful metaphor for God's presence, just like we see in this incredible line from the prophet Jeremiah.
And this new way of thinking was a total game changer. The prophets started saying, hey, just washing your body isn't enough if your heart isn't in the right place. Water became a symbol for something way bigger: God's forgiveness, a real, deep change on the inside. The focus was shifting from the external to the internal.
So we have the physical act of immersion in a mikvah on one hand, and the prophet's spiritual idea of cleansing on the other. How do these two things come together? Well, that's what we're going to explore right now as we build the bridge to baptism.
Let's put them side by side. You can really see the connection here. The Jewish mikvah was something you could do over and over to restore ritual purity. Christian baptism took that physical act of immersion but turned it into a one-time event, symbolizing a total spiritual rebirth and entry into a new community. The action looks almost the same, but the meaning? It's completely transformed.
You see, all those centuries of Jewish purification practices really set the stage perfectly. So when John the Baptist showed up calling for a baptism of repentance, the people listening got it. They already understood the physical act of immersion, and thanks to the prophets, they also understood the much deeper idea of being cleansed on the inside.
And that brings us to our final section. Let's bring it all home and really appreciate this incredible journey, this legacy in water that has flowed through history.
So, if you boil it all down, we've seen this amazing three-stage journey of an idea. It starts with the very physical, ritual purity laws in the Torah. Then it evolves with the prophets, who turn water into this beautiful metaphor for inner cleansing. And finally, it culminates in Christian baptism, which takes the physical act and fills it with this profound new spiritual meaning of rebirth.
So the next time you witness a baptism, you'll know you're not just watching a modern ritual. You're actually seeing the end of a story that started thousands of years ago with ancient laws of purity. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many other ancient rituals are still part of our lives, totally transformed and filled with brand new meaning?